I shuffled out to the curb to grab the mail in my old canvas jacket, the one with the frayed cuff I've been meaning to fix for about 6 years now. My neighbor across the street, Mrs. Petrowski, gave me her usual little wave from her porch. She thinks I'm just another retired guy on a fixed income, scraping by on Social Security, eating canned soup for dinner. That's fine. That's what I want her to think. That's what I want most everybody to think. My name is Desmond Halverson. I'm 67 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom bungalow in a quiet neighborhood on the north side of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. The house was built in 1948, and the paint on the porch railing is starting to peel for the 3rd time since I bought the place back in 1991. There's a Ford Ranger in the driveway, a 2008 model with a dent in the tailgate from when a deer ran into the side of it one fall morning out by Palisades Park. What city are you listening from tonight? And tell me, friend, have you ever been quietly underestimated by people who thought they had you figured out the second you walked in the room? Stick with me on this one, because I want you to know how it felt the day my son's future in-laws decided who I was before I'd even shaken their hands. My boy is named Wesley. He's 31 years old now, an attorney with a mid-sized firm out in Denver. He went to the University of Iowa for undergrad, and then he got himself a scholarship to law school at Boulder. Worked summers at the lumber yard with me when he was in high school. Best kid a father could ask for, and that's not me bragging, that's just the plain truth. About 14 months ago, Wesley called me up one Sunday evening and told me he'd met somebody. Her name was Adrian. She worked in real estate development, the kind that builds those big glass office parks and condo towers downtown. He said she was smart and funny and didn't take any of his lawyer nonsense, and that she made him laugh at things he'd forgotten were funny. I could hear it in his voice. A father can hear it. 6 months later, he called me again and told me he was going to ask her to marry him. I told him to do it proper. Get down on one knee. Look her in the eye. Mean every word. He laughed at me and said, "Dad, who do you think you're talking to?" And he was right. I raised him better than that. He proposed at a little spot up in Estes Park where they used to hike on weekends. She said yes. The phone call I want to tell you about came in early September. Wesley said Adrian's parents wanted to meet me before the wedding. They lived out in Aspen, in some kind of estate up in the mountains, and they wanted to host me for a weekend at their country club so we could all get acquainted. They were flying in Adrian's grandparents from Connecticut for the occasion. Her father was a man named Sheldon Marchetti. Her mother's name was Lillian. Old money, Wesley said, though he tried to say it like it didn't matter. I asked him what kind of place this was. He paused for a second on the line, and then he said, "Dad, it's the Westmoreland Club. It's nice, real nice. Just bring your goods, Sue." Now, here's the thing you have to understand about me. I have one good suit. It's a charcoal Brooks Brothers I bought in 1998 for a funeral, and I've worn it maybe 9 times since. I also have, hanging in the back of my closet, a closet full of clothes that nobody in my life has ever really looked at twice. Worn flannel shirts. A pair of Carhartt work pants with a paint stain on the right knee. Boots that are scuffed in the toe but still hold a polish if I bother to put one on. That's what I wear most days. That's what I've worn most days for 40 years. What Wesley doesn't know, what almost nobody in Cedar Rapids knows, is that in 1987 I started a small company out of a rented warehouse off 16th Avenue. I called it Halverson Industrial Coatings. It was just me and 2 guys named Roger and Pete back then. Mixing protective coatings for grain silos and farm equipment. We worked 16-hour days. I missed Wesley's first steps because I was on a job site in Sioux Falls trying to fix a customer's problem with a paint that wouldn't cure right in cold weather. That company is now one of the largest specialty coating suppliers in the Midwest. We have 3 plants. We do business in 22 states. Our revenue last fiscal year was just shy of $48 million. My take-home, conservatively, runs around $52,000 a month after taxes. Between salary, distributions, and dividends from a couple of side investments my financial advisor talked me into back in 2014. I never told Wesley, not really. He knew I owned a business that did okay. He knew we never struggled. He knew I paid for his college and his law school in full so he wouldn't graduate with debt. But I told him those were savings, sacrifices, his mother's life insurance. I never showed him the books. I never drove a fancy car. I never bought a vacation house. His mother, my Joanne, God rest her, passed in 2009 from ovarian cancer, and after she went, I stopped caring about anything that didn't matter, which turned out to be most things. The truck still ran. The house was paid off. What more does a man need? I wanted Wesley to make it on his own. I wanted him to know what it felt like to earn something. I wanted him to grow up looking at a father who came home tired in work clothes and not a father who wore a tie and signed checks. And the strangest thing is, it worked. Wesley grew up humble. He worked summers, he paid for his own car, he thought of me as a small businessman who'd done all right, and that was enough for him. He never asked questions. God love him. So when he told me about Adrian's parents and their country club and her grandparents flying in from Connecticut, I had a decision to make, and maybe it was wrong of me. I've turned it over in my head plenty of times since. But I made the decision I made, and I'll tell you about it, and you can judge me however you want. I was not going to walk into the Westmoreland Club in Aspen, Colorado in my Brooks Brothers suit and let those people decide they approved of me. I wanted to see just once who Adrian's family really was, not who they were when they thought my boy was marrying into a fortune of his own, who they were when they thought he was bringing home a girl whose father was in their minds beneath them. I packed for the trip the night before. I put my good suit in the garment bag because I'm not a fool, and I packed my dress shoes too. But I also packed a clean pair of khakis with a small bleach mark near the hem, a button-down shirt that had once been white and was now more of a cream color from too many washings, and the brown loafers I wear to church when I bother to go, which isn't often anymore. Modest clothes, not work clothes. I'm not an idiot and I respect the venue. I wasn't going to roll in there looking like I'd just come off a roofing job. But I wasn't going to wear Brooks Brothers either. I was going to look like exactly what they were expecting. A small-town father from Iowa who didn't know any better. I drove to the airport on a Friday morning. The flight to Denver was uneventful. I had a layover, then a small commuter plane that bounced through the mountain air down into the Aspen Valley. The terminal was tiny and full of people in $5,000 parkas, and there I was in my old canvas jacket with the frayed cuff. A couple of women glanced at me and then glanced past me like I was furniture, and that was the first sign that this trip was going to teach me everything I needed to know. Wesley picked me up at the curb. He hugged me hard the way he does, and then he stepped back and looked at me, and I could see him working something out behind his eyes. He didn't say anything about my clothes. He's too good a son to say anything, but I saw it. "Dad, you look tired," he said. "Was the flight okay?" "Flight was fine, son. How's Adrian?" "She's excited to see you. Nervous. She wants this to go well." "It'll go fine," I said. He drove me up the winding road toward the Marchetti's house. I have never in my life seen a house like the one we pulled up to. It was a sprawling thing of timber and stone built right into the side of the mountain, with windows the size of a small movie screen, looking out over a valley of evergreens. There was a circular drive, paved in some kind of slate. A black Range Rover was parked there, and behind it a Porsche SUV, and behind that a silver Mercedes sedan. The truck Wesley was driving, a leased Audi he was a little embarrassed about, looked like the runt of the litter. Adrian came out to meet us. She was a lovely young woman, tall and dark-haired, with kind eyes and a real smile, the kind that crinkles up at the corners. She hugged me right away and called me Mr. Halverson, and I told her to please call me Desmond. She told me her family was inside and wanted to meet me before we headed up to the club for dinner. Now here's where it started. We walked into the great room, and her mother, Lillian Marchetti, was standing by an enormous stone fireplace holding a glass of white wine. She was about my age, maybe a year or two younger, blonde hair done up in a kind of architectural way, wearing a cream silk blouse and dark slacks and a string of pearls. I'd bet my truck cost more than my truck. She looked at me. She looked at my old canvas jacket. She looked at my loafers. Then she looked back up at my face, and I watched her smile take a half-second longer to arrive than a smile should ever take, long enough for me to know what I was looking at. Desmond. How lovely. We've heard so much about you from Wesley. Did you have a pleasant flight? It was fine, ma'am. Thank you for having me. Sheldon Marchetti came in from another room. He was a tall fellow, maybe 6'3", with that silver fox hair that men of a certain station seem to grow on purpose. Charcoal sweater, dark jeans, leather house shoes. He shook my hand, and his grip was firm, but not particularly warm, and his eyes went over me the way you'd look at a piece of luggage somebody had set down in your living room without asking. Desmond. Welcome. Please, come in. Adrian tells me you're in the, what was it? The paint business? Industrial coatings, sir. Right. Well, that sounds like honest work. That's the phrase he used, honest work. The way you might describe the trade of a man who fixes your roof. Not condescending exactly. Worse than that, the way you described somebody you don't expect to have a real conversation with. Adrian's grandparents came down the staircase a moment later, a Mr. and Mrs. Whitlock from Greenwich, Connecticut. The grandfather was 84, sharp as a tack, dressed in a navy blazer with gold buttons. The grandmother was a wisp of a woman in a tweed skirt suit. They were polite. They asked me where I was from. When I said Cedar Rapids, the grandmother said, "Oh, Iowa, how pastoral." She said it like the word tasted strange in her mouth. We had cocktails. They drank a Sancerre that one of them mentioned was from a small vineyard their friend had introduced them to in Loire Valley. I had a club soda because I don't drink anymore. Haven't since 2010. Lillian made a little face when I asked for it, like a person without alcohol in their hand was a person she didn't quite trust. The conversation moved around me. They talked about somebody's renovation on a place in Telluride. They talked about a daughter of a friend who'd been admitted to Stanford. They talked about a charity gala in Greenwich. Nobody asked me a single follow-up question about my work or my life. Twice, Lillian addressed me as Dennis before Adrian corrected her under her breath. Wesley sat next to me on the couch. I felt him shifting. I felt his back getting straighter every time his future mother-in-law said something that landed the wrong way. He looked over at me a couple of times, eyebrows pulled together, almost asking a question. I gave him a small nod each time. Let it go, son. Let me see. Around 6:30, we drove up to the Westmoreland Club. The Marchettis had a black town car and a driver waiting. Sheldon insisted Wesley and I ride with him and Lillian. Adrian and her grandparents took the second car. I sat in the back of that town car beside Lillian, with Sheldon up in the passenger seat, and Wesley folded into the rear-facing jump seat across from me. Lillian kept her purse on her lap the whole ride, both hands holding it, like she was guarding it. The Westmoreland Club was something to see. Big timbered ceilings, a fireplace you could have parked the Ranger inside, a wall of windows looking out at the snow on the peaks, men in jackets, women in jackets, women in cocktail dresses, a pianist playing something slow and Italian in the corner. The Mitrod approached our party, and his eyes went straight to my khakis and my loafers, and for the briefest possible second he hesitated. "Sir," he said to me, "may I help you with your coat?" I gave him my old canvas jacket, and he held it the way you'd hold a small wet animal. Then he led us to a table by the window. Sheldon was already in conversation with somebody he knew at another table, and I heard the man say, "Sheldon, the family in town?" And Sheldon said, "Yes, Wesley's people are out from Iowa." Wesley's people, like we were a tribe. We sat. The waiter came. He addressed Sheldon and Lillian first, then Adrian and her grandparents, then Wesley. When he got to me, he gave me a look that said he wasn't sure if I knew how to read a menu. He spoke a little slower to me. He recommended the lamb, then turned to me and said, "Or, sir, if you'd like, we have a very nice burger, very popular." I ordered the trout almondine. It went on like that for an hour. The lamb came. The wine came, more Sancerre than a Bordeaux Sheldon made a small show of selecting. Lillian started in on a story about a friend of hers in Palm Beach whose daughter had married a sweet boy from somewhere in the middle of the country and how the family had been such an adjustment, and she laughed a small dry laugh and looked at me as she said it. Wesley's knuckles went white on his napkin. Adrian was trying. God love that girl, she was trying. She asked me about my house. She asked me about Wesley as a boy. She asked me what the weather was like in Iowa right now. Every time, her mother would cut in within 3 sentences and redirect to somebody named Bitsy or Caroline or to a place I'd never heard of and would never go. The grandmother, Mrs. Whitlock, leaned across the table at one point and said to me, "Now, Desmond, Wesley mentioned you've been on your own for some time. Have you considered, downsizing? At your stage in life, I imagine the house is quite a burden." I told her I managed all right. "Of course," she said. "Of course you do. It's just that, with a wedding coming, the children may want to host you out west more often, and travel is so expensive these days for someone on a—" She trailed off. I watched her search for the polite word, "on a fixed budget." I told her I'd manage. I sipped my water. Sheldon set his wine glass down and looked across at me with a smile he must have practiced in mirrors. "Desmond, let's just be direct here. We adore your son. He's bright. He's ambitious. He has a real future ahead of him. And we know how much families like yours have invested in getting a young man like Wesley where he is today. We want you to know that we appreciate that. The Marchetti family is committed to supporting Wesley and Adrian fully as they begin their lives together. The wedding, the down payment on a home, all of that, we've got it handled. You shouldn't feel any pressure to contribute, not a penny. We understand." I have replayed that moment in my head 100 times. The way he said families like yours. The way his eyes went over to my khakis under the white tablecloth as he said, "not a penny." The way Wesley sat next to me and slowly turned his head to look at his future father-in-law with an expression I had never seen on my son's face before in 31 years of being his father. The expression of a boy who has just been told something he is never going to forget. I took a breath. I set my fork down. I was about to say something polite and small because that's what I came to do. That's what I'd planned. Just sit there and absorb it and learn what I needed to learn, when Wesley spoke first. "Sheldon." That was all he said for a beat. Just the name. The way you say a person's name when you have decided you were no longer going to let something pass. "Sheldon, that is my father you're talking to, and whether he contributes a penny or $1 million to my wedding is not a topic for this table. He is here as a guest. He flew out here because he loves me. And I'd ask you to speak to him with the respect that any father deserves, the same respect I would show you if our positions were reversed." The table went quiet. Lillian's mouth opened a half-inch. The grandmother set down her wine glass with a small, distinct click. Adrian reached over and put her hand on Wesley's forearm, but she was looking at her father, and I could see her face, and she was not asking my son to stop. She was holding on. Sheldon recovered fast. He gave a small chuckle, the kind a man uses to reset a room. "Of course, Wesley, of course. I didn't mean any offense. I'm only saying we're happy to take the pressure off." "There was no pressure," Wesley said. "Nobody at this table asked you to take pressure off of anyone." I put my hand on my son's shoulder. I gave him a small squeeze. He looked at me. I gave him the smallest nod I could manage. "I see you, son. I have always seen you. Sit down. I have always seen you. Sit down. Now, let me do this part. The waiter came back to ask about dessert. Sheldon ordered the cheese course for the table and a port that I assumed cost 3 figures a glass. The conversation tried to restart. The grandfather asked Wesley a question about his firm. Lillian tried to engage Adrian in a sidebar about flowers. Everyone was trying to put the room back together. I sat there quietly and waited. The bill came 40 minutes later, brought in a leather folio by the maitre d' himself, who set it down with great ceremony in front of Sheldon. Sheldon took out a black credit card, the kind that's actually made of metal and has weight to it, and slipped it inside without looking at the number. He handed it back to the maitre d' with a small flick of his wrist. The maitre d' came back about 5 minutes later. There was something not quite right in his face. He bent down next to Sheldon and spoke quietly. Sheldon's expression didn't change at first. Then it did, a small tightening around the eyes. He said something back. The maitre d' nodded and walked away. Sheldon turned to Lillian and said, in a voice meant to be quiet but not quiet enough, "There's some problem with the card. Probably a fraud hold. Give me your Amex." Lillian fished in her purse and produced a card. The maitre d' came back, took it, and disappeared again. He returned 3 minutes later, even less comfortable than before. He bent down next to Sheldon and whispered something. Sheldon's jaw moved. "I want to tell you something. I knew exactly what was happening, and I knew because I had made one phone call from the airport in Denver during my layover. You see, the Marchetti name had come up 6 months earlier in a conversation I'd had with my CFO back in Cedar Rapids. Marchetti Development Group, out of Aspen, had been a customer of ours for the better part of 9 years. They built luxury commercial properties up and down the Front Range, and they had standing contracts with Halverson Industrial Coatings for the specialty finishes on their parking structures and the protective coatings on their mechanical systems. It wasn't our biggest account, but it was steady, about $2.4 million a year, and 6 months ago my people had flagged some payment irregularities on the Marchetti account. Sheldon's company was stretching their payables out past 90 days, then past 120. We'd extended credit, the way you do with a long-standing customer. Then we'd extended it again. As of 3 weeks before that dinner, Marchetti Development owed Halverson Industrial Coatings just over $1,100,000. When Wesley told me the name of the family I was meeting, I sat down at my kitchen table and stared out the window for about 45 minutes. Then I called my CFO. I told him to put a credit hold on the Marchetti account, effective immediately. No more product shipments. And I told him that if Sheldon Marchetti's name showed up on any personal accounts, we could verify through the credit reporting we did on principals of customer companies. Those needed to be cross-referenced. Sheldon, it turned out, had personally guaranteed a line of credit to one of our financing partners, and he'd been carrying balances on that line that suggested his personal cash flow was a lot tighter than the timbered mansion in Aspen suggested. I am not a vindictive man. I want you to know that. I had no plan sitting in my kitchen to do anything other than put my own house in order. The credit hold was business. The cross-reference was due diligence. What happened at that table was not something I orchestrated. It was something Sheldon had been racing toward for 2 years, and it just happened to catch up with him on a Friday night in front of his daughter's future father-in-law. The maitre d' came back a third time. Sheldon's face was a different color now. He pulled out his wallet, fumbled through it. He found another card. He handed it over. The maitre d' walked away. Lillian was staring at her husband. "Sheldon, what is happening? It's nothing. It's a glitch. The bank does this sometimes." The maitre d' came back. This time he didn't bend down. He stood next to the table, and his voice, while still respectful, had the smallest edge of formality. "Mr. Marchetti, I'm so sorry. None of the cards are processing. Would you like to try a different method of payment?" Sheldon had no other method of payment. I could see it. The Whitlocks could have stepped in, I imagine, but they were old and they were genteel, and they were watching this whole thing in a kind of frozen horror. Wesley reached for his wallet, and I put my hand on his wrist. "I've got it," I said. I took out my wallet. It was an old brown leather wallet that Joanne had given me for Christmas in 2003. I slid out a card. It was not metal. It was not black. It was a plain blue business card with the Halverson Industrial Coatings logo embossed in the lower right corner. I handed it to the maître d'hôtel. "Run this one, please." He looked at the card. He looked at me. Something passed across his face. He'd seen the logo before, maybe on an invoice, maybe on the side of one of our trucks. He gave a small, very correct nod, and he walked away. The table was silent. Sheldon was staring at me. Lillian was staring at me. Adrienne had her hand over her mouth. Wesley was just looking at his father. The maître d' returned within a minute. He set the folio in front of me with a respect that he had not shown when he'd led me to the table an hour and a half ago. "Mr. Halverson, thank you, sir." Everything went through perfectly. I signed the slip. I tipped 25%. I closed the folio. Then I turned to Sheldon Marchetti. "Sheldon," I said, "it's funny. Halverson Industrial Coatings. I don't suppose you'd recognize the name. My company supplies the protective coatings on most of your parking structures and the specialty paint on the mechanical rooms in your last 4 commercial developments. Your company is one of our customers, or I should say, was. As about 3 weeks ago, we put a credit hold on the Marchetti development account. You owe us a little over $1 million, and our finance team is finding it difficult to get a return call from your CFO. I'd been planning on giving you another 60 days. As a courtesy, the grandfather, Mr. Whitlock, slowly set down his port. I went on. I did not raise my voice. I kept my hands flat on the white tablecloth. "I came here tonight, Sheldon, because my son is marrying your daughter, and I wanted to meet the family. I dressed the way I did because I wanted to see who you were when you thought I had nothing. Now I know. So let me tell you what's going to happen. My company will not be lifting the credit hold. Your firm will be making good on the outstanding balance within 30 days, or my legal team will be filing in district court in Denver. That is not personal. That is business, and I run my business by the same rules with everyone, and I am not going to change them for the man who just spent 90 minutes letting his wife and his mother-in-law treat my son's father like a charity case." I turned to Adrienne. Her eyes were wet. I softened. "Adrienne, honey, none of this is about you. You're a wonderful young woman, and my son loves you, and I think you are going to be a fine daughter-in-law. I'm not punishing you. I'm not punishing Wesley. This is between me and your father, and the wedding can go ahead just as planned, and I will dance with you at your reception, and I will love you like my own. All right?" She nodded. A tear came down her cheek. She said, "Yes, sir." I turned to Lillian. I have to admit, this part I had not planned. "Mrs. Marchetti, my wife Joanne passed in 2009. She was the best person I have ever known. She would have walked into your home tonight in a department store dress and a pair of plain earrings, and she would have said exactly the right thing to every person at this table, and she would have made all of you better for it, without ever needing you to know what we have or what we don't have. That is what class is. I'm sorry, you don't seem to know that." Lillian started crying. I didn't enjoy it. I'm not telling you I enjoyed it. Wesley stood up beside me. He helped me with my chair. He looked at Adrienne. "Honey, I'll meet you back at the house. Dad and I need a minute." Adrienne nodded. She stood up too, and she came around the table, and she hugged me. She held on for a long minute. Then she whispered, "Thank you for coming, Mr. Halverson." "Thank you," whispered. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Halverson. Thank you." Wesley and I walked out of the Westmoreland Club together. The maître d' brought me my old canvas jacket, and this time he held it for me to slip into, and he said, "Mr. Halverson, it has been an honor to serve you tonight, sir." Out in the parking lot, the snow had started to come down in fat, slow flakes. Wesley stopped under one of the gas lamps and turned to me, and my boy, my 31-year-old boy, started to cry. Just a little. He wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. "Dad, why didn't you tell me? I wanted you to grow up right, son. All these years, all these years, all these years. And look at you. You grew up right." He hugged me. He's taller than I am now, has been since he was 17. He hugged me the way he used to hug me when he was 8 years old, and the world had hurt his feelings. We drove back to my hotel in Wesley's leased Audi. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. When he dropped me off, he said, "Dad, I want you to know something." The minute Sheldon started talking, before any of the rest of it happened, I was going to say what I said. The card business didn't change that. "I want you to know." "I know, son. I want you to know I would have said it even if you'd been everything they thought you were." "I know." Wesley and Adrian got married the following May in a small ceremony at a lodge in Estes Park. 48 people. I walked Adrian down the aisle in place of her father, who did not attend. Sheldon paid the outstanding balance to Halverson Industrial Coatings in 2 installments and never spoke to me again. Lillian sent me a Christmas card that first year, a printed one with no note, just her signature. I don't know what to make of it. I don't think about it much. Mrs. Whitlock, the grandmother, wrote me a letter about 3 weeks after the dinner, a real letter on heavy stationery in beautiful handwriting. She apologized. She said she had failed in a way she was not proud of, and she said she hoped that someday I might allow her to make it right. I wrote her back. I told her there was nothing to make right. People reveal themselves. That's the whole game. I told her I appreciated the letter and I would be glad to see her at the wedding. She came. She danced with me to a slow song, this little 84-year-old woman in a navy dress, and she said in my ear, "Desmond, you are the best of us." And I thought about Joanne, and I said, "No, ma'am, my wife was. I'm just the man she left behind." I'm sitting on my porch tonight as I record this in Cedar Rapids in the same canvas jacket with the frayed cuff. Mrs. Petrowski just waved at me from across the street. She still thinks I'm a retired man on a fixed income, scraping by. That's all right by me. The truck still runs. The porch still needs paint. Wesley calls me every Sunday, and Adrian is pregnant with a little girl due in March. She's going to be named Joanne after her grandmother. I am going to spoil that child rotten. I'll tell you what I learned, though, friend. You probably already know it. You judge a person by how they treat the people they think can do nothing for them. That's the whole of it. Money doesn't tell you who somebody is. Class doesn't tell you who somebody is. Where they're from doesn't tell you who somebody is. The way they look at the waiter, the way they look at the old man in the worn jacket, the way they speak to the people they think don't matter. That's the whole test. And it's the easiest test in the world to pass, and somehow most people manage to fail it. So tell me, what city are you listening from? And have you ever been written off by people who thought they had you figured out? I'd like to hear your story too. Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. I'm just a man on a porch in Iowa, and I'm listening. I've thought a lot about that night at the Westmoreland Club in the months that have passed. About why I did what I did, and whether I'd do it the same way again. The honest answer is yes, I do it the same way. Not because I needed to prove anything to Sheldon or Lillian or anyone at that table, but because I needed to know, for my son's sake, who the people were that were going to be sitting across from him at every Thanksgiving for the rest of his life. Here's what I keep coming back to, friend. Every choice we make plants a seed. Sheldon spent 30 years treating people like they were either useful to him or invisible. He didn't decide to be cruel to me at that dinner. He just acted out the habit he built over a lifetime of practice. The credit hold on his account, the unpaid invoices, the way his cards declined one after another, those weren't accidents either. Those were seeds he'd planted years ago, watered with arrogance, harvested at the worst possible moment in front of the people he most wanted to impress. That's how it works. We don't get punished for our character. We get revealed by it. And Wesley, my boy, the reason Wesley stood up at that table and spoke for me before I had to speak for myself was not luck. It was 31 years of watching his old man come home tired in work clothes and treat the gas station attendant the same way he treated the banker. He grew up around a quiet kind of decency, and when the moment came, it was already inside him. That's a seed, too, the most important kind a father can plant. I want to say something about strength, because I think we get it wrong in this country sometimes. We think strength is the loud kind, the man who dominates a room, the fellow with the metal credit card and the silver hair. But real strength, the kind that holds up over a lifetime, is quiet. It's the man who keeps his word when no one's watching. It's the woman who tells the truth when a lie would be easier. It's the parent who sacrifices in private, so the child never has to know what was given up. Joanne had that kind of strength. I have tried in my plainer way to have it too. If you're listening to this and you've ever been the one written off at the table, I want you to hear me. Don't change to please them. Don't shrink to fit in their picture of you. Build the life you want, quietly. Treat people well, especially the ones who can't do anything for you. Work hard. Save. Be patient. The world has a long memory, and it eventually evens itself out. Not always in the way we expect, but it does. I'm just a man on a porch in Iowa, but I am sure of this much. The right life, lived the right way, will speak for itself when the moment comes. You won't have to say a word. The room will go quiet, and the truth will walk in, wearing your face.